It was a mild April night in southern Michigan when everything changed. I was up late, the TV flickering quietly as I dozed off, and just as I was getting ready for bed, I felt a strange, uneasy feeling that compelled me to look out the window. Normally, I'd see my neighbor's porch lights, a comforting glow in the otherwise dark night, but this time, what met my eyes set my heart racing. There, not more than a few yards away, were two large, yellow, bloodshot eyes. At first, I couldn't believe what I was seeing, but as I squinted through the darkness, it became clear. The creature had brown fur and enormous shoulders, but it was those eyes that really stood out, watching me with an intense, almost predatory gaze. I ripped the blanket off and jumped out of my chair, rushing towards the door. In my panic, I realized it wasn't completely shut, and worse yet, not locked. Instinctively, I pushed on the door, trying to shut and lock it, but it wouldn't budge. Something on the other side, powerful and relentless, was pushing back. My fight to secure the door was futile. Fear coursed through me as I abandoned the effort and sprinted to the bathroom, locking the door behind me. I held my breath, listening intently for any sounds indicating it had come inside. After a few tense, silent minutes, I crept out, tiptoeing to the bedroom to grab my gun. I woke my wife, whispering the terrifying situation to her. With my heart pounding, I quietly, cautiously made my way back to the living room, gun raised. The door was ajar, just like I left it, but there was no sign of the creature. Peeking outside into the darkness, I saw nothing but the usual shapes of my yard under the moonlight. I called my friend to come over with his truck and searchlights. We scoured the property but found no trace of the creature that night. It wasn't until the next morning that I discovered muddy, hairy fingerprints on the windowsill. Judging by the height of the window, this creature had to be between 8 and 8.5 feet tall. Since that night, strange occurrences have been a regular part of our lives. My wife and I hear long, mournful cries in the dead of night, sometimes accompanied by the sound of brush breaking from the distance. We occasionally smell a horrid stench, like rotting skunk, wafting through the air. One early morning, my friend and I sat in his vehicle for hours, hoping to catch a glimpse of whatever was out there. We heard shifting in the brush and saw the outline of something moving through the weeds. Dogs bark into the night, alert to a presence in the shadows. We've had sticks and rocks thrown at our cars, and once my friend swore he saw a man-like figure cross our field of vision, but couldn't get the spotlight on it in time. Neighbors shared their own eerie experiences, reporting to the police about a man or something lurking around their properties. For 8 long years, this bizarre activity has continued. Our once quiet community turned into a hotspot for Bigfoot sightings. We've found footprints, seen claw marks on trailers, and even had fence posts ripped out of the ground. Today, we're more cautious. We keep our doors locked, always on edge, waiting for the next sign of the creature. Whether it's a rock thrown at us while driving or the faint sound of something being dragged through the woods, the eerie presence of what I now call Sasquatch haunts our lives. And so, each night, as the darkness falls, we brace ourselves for whatever encounters might come next. It was the fall of 1997, just outside of Gladstone, Michigan. I had just clocked out of work and picked up my 3 kids. We made a quick stop at the Quick Mart to grab some snacks and then headed out of town. The stretch of highway we were on was pretty desolate, with only a few cars passing by here and there. It was getting late, and a steady drizzle had started, making everything look a bit dreary. The roads were slick and shiny, and the sky was that dull, murky gray that comes with fall rain. As I was driving, something caught my eye off to the side of the road. At first I thought it was a hunter crouched down low among the trees, trying not to be seen. My son was the first one to really notice. "Look at that stupid hunter. Why is he crouching like that?" he said, chuckling a bit. We got closer, and that's when things got strange. The figure that we thought was a hunter started to stand up. It was massive, probably close to 8 feet tall and covered in brown hair. Its coloring blended perfectly with the fall foliage of the Upper Peninsula. I've lived in the UP my entire life and have seen almost every animal that calls this place home. But this was different. In just 2 long strides, it had crossed the road right in front of us and disappeared into the woods on the other side. My kids were in awe, eyes wide and mouths open in disbelief. The area was pretty swampy and marshy, with no homes or signs of people around for miles. It struck me that this could be the perfect place for something like a Bigfoot to thrive. Yes, I can't believe I just said Bigfoot, but honestly, I have no other way to describe what we saw. Even now, whenever I drive down that same stretch of highway, I can't help but glance toward the woods, searching for another glimpse of that mysterious creature. This sighting has stayed with me, a constant reminder that maybe, just maybe, there's more out there in those dense wild woods than we can ever hope to understand. It was the summer of '96 around Marquette, Michigan. My friends and I were riding dirt bikes down an old abandoned highway close to the city. The road was littered with downed trees, and the air was thick with the scent of pine and dirt. It was a perfect adventure on a lazy summer day. As we navigated through the debris, I noticed movement out of the corner of my eye. It was subtle at first, just a flicker against the greenery, but it was enough to grab my attention. I hit the brakes and stared at the spot. There, crouching low in the middle of the highway, was a creature. It seemed to be eating something, its movements deliberate and almost methodical. As it turned and looked directly at me, a chill ran down my spine. This was no bear or any other animal I could recognize. It was something entirely different. My friends hadn't noticed it yet. They were still riding a little behind me. I was transfixed, my heart pounding in my chest. The creature started to stand, but it stayed hunched over, like it was trying to stay close to the ground. That's when I realized it was walking on 2 feet, just like a human. It moved slowly to the center of the road, its eyes locking onto mine. Time seemed to stretch out in that moment. It stared at me, and I couldn't look away. Then it glanced over its right shoulder, looking at an embankment off the road, as if it was considering an escape route. It turned back to me, and for even longer this time, our eyes remained locked. By now, my friends had caught up. They saw my face, turned to follow my pointing finger, and their jaws dropped. The creature's entire body was covered in dull, matted fur. It had long arms and slightly shorter legs, with a build reminiscent of a gorilla but distinctly different. I could see its face, though it blended with the fur, making details hard to discern. What stood out most were its eyes, almost glowing, with a strange, eerie light that might have been a reflection from the sun behind us. Suddenly, the creature began to move. It was a slow, cautious advance towards the embankment. Then, without warning, it lunged up the bank with incredible ease, disappearing into the trees. For a moment, we lost sight of it, only to watch it leap over fallen trees and navigate the forest with remarkable speed and agility. We just sat there on our bikes, speechless. None of us could believe what we'd just seen. It was an encounter that defied explanation, something straight out of a nightmare or a legend. We knew, right then and there, that this was a tale we'd be telling our grandchildren someday, and we did. T was a beautiful fall day in the early '90s, near Grayling, Michigan, when I decided to go deer hunting. The day started out uneventful until late afternoon when I began hearing noises in the brush next to my tree stand. I drew my bow, hoping it was a deer, but nothing appeared. I thought, must have been a bunny. About an hour later, I heard more noise in the brush, and what came out had me rubbing my eyes in disbelief. Standing about 20 yards away was this creature, around 5 feet tall, with a face that looked like a mix between a human and a chimp. I drew my bow again, my heart pounding, but then I really saw it. This creature was covered in fur that seemed to have a greenish gray-black tint. I lowered my bow, thinking, this can't be Bigfoot. It's too small. But then it hit me. What if this was a juvenile? The creature didn't have the horrible stench that others have described in their encounters. Instead, it had this almost curious, playful vibe as it moved behind a tree, peeking out at me like we were playing some strange game of peekaboo. I got the sense it wasn't here to harm me. It had a glint in its eye and almost a smile on its face. For some reason, I wasn't frightened by it. It seemed as fascinated by me as I was by it. The encounter didn't last very long. The creature eventually moved off, disappearing into the woods. I got down from my tree stand, still shaken, but not entirely scared, and headed home for the night. The thought of its possible mother lurking nearby crossed my mind, knowing how protective mothers can be of their young. The next day, curiosity got the better of me, and I went back to my tree stand to look for tracks or any signs of the small creature. I didn't find anything, but I couldn't shake the eerie sensation that I was being watched. That encounter definitely changed the way I think about the woods and what might be out there. It made me realize that even in the most familiar of places, there are still mysteries waiting to be discovered.